Yeah.
And
Well, tell us a little bit. Why are you an avatar or a cartoon versus a live feed like us?
let's get the elephant out of the room. So
Yeah.
the days that I started at doing voiceover, I was always taught that a voiceover is to be heard, not seen. And so predominantly most of my career as a voiceover was based on the sound of my voice, not for what I look like. So it's just been my branding. Walt Disney did that himself when he would cast his animated movies. He would go into a room and then the actors would go into another room. So he wouldn't see them. He would just hear them. And they would be assigned numbers and he'd say, I like number 3, number 10, number 9, whatever. And they would narrow it down as opposed to basing it on how the person looked or if he knew the person or whatever. It was based solely on how they're sounding.
Yeah.
So my voice, I get a lot of roles that I probably would not get if someone saw what I look like, both old and young or whatever. So just uses the camera of the mind basically as to leaves that up to the listener.
My dad was a screenwriter. I wrote for a lot of famous shows, Hogan Tiros, Andy Griffith, Gomer Pyle, Mary Tyler Moore, Barney Miller, Charlie's Angels, Happy Days. I was always a big sports fan. I always wanted to be a sportscaster. My parents were very into current events, so I wanted to be a newscaster too. So I got my degree in broadcasting, but around the time I was getting my degree, a lot of my classmates that I went to school with in Malibu, people like Charlie Sheen and Rob Lowe, were making it big time. And I said, I think I'm going to stick around to LA a little bit and try the acting thing.
I did Christopher Robin for Winnie the Pooh and various other storyteller records. Like a lot of other kids, we're all young and thin and cute when we were little. So I started doing, if there was a cereal in the 70s, I probably was eating it as a child. We were always having to go up to the Simi Valley back then it was filmed at the Big Sky Ranch, which is in the Simi Valley north of Los Angeles.
People would move away from Los Angeles to live in a place like Wichita, Kansas, or Oklahoma City. But I was doing a story today for a local PBS show that I freelance for, and it was quite a drive, but it was a relaxing drive because there was so much open farmland. I spent my summers in northern Michigan because, again, as I mentioned earlier, my dad was from Ohio, and a lot of people from Ohio found this little area up in northern Michigan by Mackinac Island. A lot of people know Mackinac Island. So when I would go back in the summers, that's when I started realizing that where I grew up was atypical because people were absolutely fascinated by the work that my dad did. And that's when I started realizing how important certain shows were to people. They would just see Hollywood through their TVs, but actually knowing somebody that was living that life, they were really enamored with it. So that's when I started figuring out that this was not a typical upbringing.
I think, like what you said earlier, bringing the humanity to what we've done was just, I didn't choose how I grew up, and neither did Anthony, but we were hit the lottery as far as having the right parents at the right time.
A lot of playing tennis with Rod Steiger. Oh, people have always told me I have a great voice, but that's about 1/1 millionth of what it takes.
In those days, if we filmed at the NBC or wherever we were filming a TV show, it was just pure mayhem, but not on Michael Landon's set because he'd been a child actor. So he knew he knew what kind of mayhem could happen. If we were not on the set blocking and rehearsing lines for the camera, we were offset either rehearsing or we were with our California state appointed set tutor, studying history or whatever the heck that they had for our daily goal or whatever. We weren't in Glendale or Burbank or wherever. We were a long way north of LA and we didn't even have restrooms. Everything was outdoors. It was like camping, basically. He was so gregarious and funny and just had great charisma. And I, as a kid, just loved being around him and hearing his stories and hearing his jokes. He gathered us all up and he was looking around. He's, yeah, no, I don't see any Paul Newmans here. I don't see any James Deans or Liz Taylors. And he's looking at all of us. And he goes, yeah, unfortunately, all of you are going to grow up to be big, fat, ugly, and probably bald. He was just saying that there's other things to do in the business that'll keep you in the business and you don't have to worry about all this other stuff.
It's all these different people that make movies that shape our generations.
My dad has passed away. Here I am still getting residual checks for his shows, 60 years old. And I have a lot of people telling me in this fast-paced world we live in, they like watching Andy Griffith because it calms them down. It reminds them of a simpler time.
It's something that he and I have taken for granted just because of the way we were raised and we had great parents and they knew how to raise families. And in my family, it was taking care of the family first. And it just so happens this is what we do. But there's so many myths, and I just daily, and again, we talk about this with Anthony, about so many myths that are perpetuated about how easy it is to make 7 figures and how easy it is to break into this or that. And it's not that way.